Welcome to Detangle, where we untangle the complexities of life one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Dr. Kinjal Goel, a psychologist and a writer. Today, I'm joined by Shreya Godawat. Shreya is a sustainability strategist, a climate advocate, and a podcaster herself. But more than titles, what really stands out to me about her work is how deeply personal her approach to sustainability is. Shreya speaks about the environment, animals, and conscious living in a way that feels emotional, reflective, and really rooted in everyday life. In this conversation, we're going to explore sustainability through a psychological lens, how our choices shape our minds, how empathy is built, and how caring for the planet can also be a way of caring for ourselves. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast, Shreya. Welcome to
Thank
Detangle.
you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Well, let's dive right in. To begin with, I'd love to go back to the start. What was your personal turning point emotionally, psychologically? You're so young. What nudged you towards sustainability and conscious living?
Wow. I don't think there was one particular moment. I think it all snowballed. My turning point probably started much earlier than I realized. I grew up in a really small town in India, on the outskirts of Kolhapur.
Hmm.
But I grew up surrounded by animals and nature. Animals, were not this abstract idea. They were just part of everyday life, whether, it's cows, dogs, birds, donkeys, monkeys, peacocks. I saw them, I saw them around in my surrounding. We lived alongside them. You notice their moods, their presence. The only way you find a way to protect something is once you respect it and you have that affinity towards it. And I think that's what made me an environmentalist even before I knew what that word meant. Um, when you grow up that close to nature, you don't see nature as commodity. You don't see animals as commodity. You just, see them as part of who you are. So that kind of care always stayed with me. And
Hmm.
growing up in Kolhapur, I think there was this infamous thing that used to happen almost every monsoon season, which is the floods. And you
Right.
can see pictures online that most of the towns around, the districts around, used to be underwater, submerged under water. Houses were covered. There were crocodiles in people's houses. It was just a regular phenomena that everyone would just accept as normal. And the reason it stayed with me is because I had to cross a bridge, an overwater bridge, to go to school. And every monsoon season, that bridge was completely submerged underwater.
Hmm.
And I didn't know back then that, this is what climate change meant, that these are the extreme impacts of weather events that we talk about now. But I just knew there was a sense of, something is not right. Like, why is nature reacting this way? And it wasn't until much, much later when I was studying sociology in university. I was very drawn to social injustice movements. I was always really drawn to, how to fix what's wrong, including whether it's feminism, any social justice movement that's ever happened. I was always very drawn to it. So I was studying sociology, and there was a lecture on food systems, and my professor was talking about how a lot of what we eat today is based on marketing and propaganda and what industries wanted to sell us as healthy. Obviously,
Correct.
now we've started questioning and saying, let's read nutrition labels, let's understand. Consumers have taken that. But back in the day, we were just eating and consuming whatever was sold to us, whatever, TV ads sold to us. So this professor reframed everything for me when she said, that milk is the biggest advertising scam that there is. And I was like, what do you mean? She said, think about it. Cows don't give milk. They produce milk because they're mothers, and that milk is meant for calves. And humans are the only species in the world that drink milk of another species. You won't see a cat drink milk from a dog. You don't see a giraffe drink milk from an elephant. So she's like, the fact that we do that, it was sold to us.
Correct.
And that was that turning point that made me question everything. I couldn't stop researching. I visited over 80 gaushalas when I came back to India. I read so many books. I saw so many documentaries. And once I understood how the dairy industry functions, I've seen the separation of calves. I've seen the exploitation. I was like, that's it. Like, I'm Jain. I was raised vegetarian, but what I'm doing is not ethical. And
Hmm.
that's how I think my journey began. It was inevitable.
Wow. It also reminds me of a moment when my babies were really, really tiny, and I had spoken to their pediatrician and asked him, what is the minimum amount of milk they should consume to be healthy babies? And he had told me there is no minimum. I can give you a maximum because this is really bad for them. And that changed my perspective also. I said, oh, we've just been raised, being told that milk is good, but there is a side of milk which is not natural at all for our consumption.
Exactly. And we're not told this, that we only need milk when we were young, when we were babies. After that, we actually grow lactose intolerant to milk, which is why, I mean, it shows up as swelling, bloating, acne, sensitivity, redness. We don't call that lactose intolerant, but it is forms of lactose intolerant to any other milk than a mother's milk. So you're so right about that.
True. It also reminds me of something I read recently. I do a lot of work in the field of people trying to find their passion and trying to do something to change the world. And there was a
Hmm.
beautiful podcast in which they discussed that the world already has a to-do list. There are things we really need to fix. Start with that. And what you're saying, what you saw around yourself as you grew up, that was your local to-do list. These things needed to be taken care of. These were the red flags. They needed to be noticed. And I think if we all start noticing this just around us, we all have our work cut out. We all have things to do.
Absolutely. And it's that, I think it's just being more intentional and being more mindful of where you are, what you see, what you've been told, and just maybe questioning it and seeing if there's a better way of doing it.
So it also brings me to the fact that whenever we talk about sustainability, it's often framed as data, numbers, urgency, fear. But
Hmm.
I think you bring a lot of positive emotion into it. So tell me, what do you think the role of emotion is in sustainability?
I think it's everything. There's such coldness attached to the way we talk about climate change, the way we talk about sustainability, and it doesn't move people. We're hardwired for stories. I think we're hardwired for feelings, which is why I think when we talk about atrocities and it's discussed in numbers, you could talk about millions of people dying, but sometimes the impact that one person's story has, that hey, she was a student and she was these many years old and these were her dreams and
Hmm.
aspirations, that makes you stop and wonder. That makes you form that connection with that person, that oh my god, she was just someone like me, who lost her life to this disaster, war, whatever that might be. So there's that connection. I think it's the same in the animal rights movement, that one pig's story, maybe one pig was saved from a rescue farm. We kill millions of pigs every year for food, but if there's that one rescue story that stands out to you, I think that'll lead to a diet shift faster than me just throwing statistics your way. The most amount of impact that you would have is me showing you a visual of a polar bear that's starving, floating on ice, versus me telling you that 13% of Arctic ice is melting.
True.
It's that we relate to stories, we relate to visuals. There is that psychic numbing. I think there's this concept of psychic numbing that happens when numbers grow bigger and bigger. We stop processing it because it's detached to us. It's something that we can't relate to. So when someone compares it to, hey, we're burning Amazon the size of California, we're burning, eating this burger is equivalent to taking like 400 showers, you almost need data that is relatable in
Correct.
your head.
Otherwise, you feel
You
too
want me to
small.
compare it. Exactly. That, makes you relate to the problem. And that's when you know how to take action. Because if something feels too big for you and too disconnected from you, you're not going to act on it. And the same thing happens with me. I got into this climate space because I relate to what was happening in my neighborhood. It was immediate. It's not a future thing. It's happening in my town, in my city, where I grew up right now. It's not going to happen 10 years later. We're seeing the impacts of air pollution. We're seeing the impacts of heat waves, droughts right now. And summer's going to come. It's going to be hotter than ever. These are facts that we live with. At least in the global south, this is our lived reality. So we have to relate it to livelihoods. We have to relate it to problems in our neighborhood and in our vicinity and to people who are close to us. That's how I think you change behavior. That's how you get people to care and act. If you talk about it as something that's distant, is going to happen in the future and it's happening in the Arctic and it's 20 years away, no one's going to want to act.
Yeah, people feel we're not impacted immediately. There was such a beautiful
Yeah.
line which had come up during the wildfires recently, that a wildfire is something we saw in the news at one point. Then they came in our mobile phones as reels, and now we are the ones shooting them. So it's
Yeah.
getting real, it's getting closer. We can feel the
Yeah.
heat.
Absolutely. And that's scary. But I also don't want fear to paralyze people, because there's so much to be done and there's so much beautiful work happening in this space, that I also don't want that fear to make us lose hope saying it's too late, because it's really not.
Correct. So what you're basically
Um,
saying is that sustainability is more a psychological shift than a lifestyle shift.
Absolutely. I think it's a bit of both because when you think about it from a psychological point of view, something inside you has to shift first. That's when your outside reality matches to it. You have to almost view the world differently. And there's that lens that happened with me when I went vegan. And there was that eye opening moment that I told you about. I'm like, oh, cows are not milk making machines, they're mothers.
Mhm.
I started seeing every animal product the same way. So now when I look at a silk sari, it's not something that's beautiful to me because I know that it takes hundreds and thousands of silkworms that are boiled alive to make that piece of fabric. So when I'm buying something and I see that there's silk in it, I'll immediately put it down. When I see wool, I've been to wool factories and wool farms in New Zealand, so I know how where wool comes from and how it's made. So when you start seeing things the way they in terms of how they're made and who's harmed behind it and who's not harmed behind it, I think you start questioning your consumption pattern. So it's that almost a psychological internal shift that happens first that reflects on what you choose to buy and who you choose to be. And that questioning, I think that's the most intentional way of living. Because as we grow up, we just do what we're told to do. We never
Mm.
question it. Why am I using this? Why am I wearing it? Why am I eating it? But when that shift happens internally, that, hey, I'm going to be more mindful, I'm going to be more conscious, and I want to be more sustainable because obviously it also feels good to my body. What am I putting in? The clothes that we wear, right? I didn't know polyester gym wear was so bad for women's health, that it's affecting our hormones. We sweat in it. We wear these, cheap polyester clothing. We wear fast fashion brands, but minus the human rights cost of it, it's also like a very deep personal health cost for us. So
Hmm.
when you start living in a better way, even for yourself, begins with that, self love. That, hey, sustainability. I'm not just doing this because it's good for the environment. It's actually good for me. So when it starts feeling good, I think that psychological shift starts reflecting into a lifestyle shift, and it becomes a way of living that's so beautiful. It doesn't take anything away. It just adds more to your life.
Super. I also think that there's been a lot of, there's a very strong relationship that we've had with animals in terms of dominance, entitlement, disconnection. But from what you say, I feel like if people get more sustainable in their daily choices, it'll expand their capacity to feel for animals and even get more empathetic.
100%. I think what makes us human is empathy. Every
Mm.
time, I think that's how we were taught as kids as well. Like, imagine how someone would feel. If we hurt someone, we were always told कि उसको कैसे लगा होगा. तूने कभी सोचा, how would that, when
Right.
you put yourself in someone else's shoes, that's the basis of empathy. And that's what we have to do with animals. Sure, they can't speak, but it's not like they don't convey what we're doing to them. Animals will always scream. You can hear them cry, you can hear them whelp. And those are, most of the factory farming footages that you see. They will scream for mercy. It's just that we don't listen to those sounds. But it's just about understanding that how would we feel if we were in that position, if we were caged our whole lives, if we were bred as food on someone's plate for 10 minutes. And I think about that in the dairy industry, especially because cows are pregnant exactly as long as human mothers are. Cows are pregnant for 9 months. Human mothers are pregnant for 9 months. They go through the same process. So imagine if your baby was taken away the second your baby was born because someone else had to, steal your milk. So when you empathize in that way, I think you realize that, hey, no, I don't want to live this way because I wouldn't want that done to me or my children. And that's the basis of connection. I think that's the basis of love.
And I think it's our biggest power, the power of choice. We can always make a better
100%.
choice.
And as humans, we that's what sets us apart, that we can make better choices, that we can learn, we have access to knowledge, and we can feel. But I think love about everything else, love above everything else, and we need to bring more emotions into this movement, whether it's joy and it's peace and it's hope, but love and empathy at the heart of it, for sure.
But don't you feel a lot of people resist these conversations defensively? I mean, I've tried getting into these myself. I'm an animal rights, not activist, I would say, but at least I live my life in a more aware way. I don't use any animal product as far as I can help it. But there's a lot of
Yeah.
resistance. There's a lot of defense in these conversations. What do you think is driving it? Is it habit, fear, guilt, or just availability of these products in the market?
It's definitely not fear of what's available, what's not, and I think that defense is justified because when we question how we've been consuming and using animal products, it
Hmm.
makes you question your entire history, your culture, your conditioning, how you were raised. That's an attack. That's an attack, and if it's making you re-question and rethink everything, it's very uncomfortable for a lot of people. And I've been through that. As I told you, I was raised vegetarian. I come from a Jain family, but we've always bought leather. We've always, worn silk clothing at weddings. We never questioned it. So
Hmm.
when I started questioning it, it was uncomfortable for a lot of people around me that, hey, why are you making us change our lifestyle the way that we were raised? We did it in the past. We've always done it this way. You're shaking that sense of comfort. And in any movement, that's going to be uncomfortable. That's going to be uneasy. That's going to make us want put our walls up saying, but I don't want to change anything about the way that I've been raised. I don't want to question this, and I don't want to put myself through that inconvenience to change everything that I've been feeling. And I did a deep dive on this. I really wanted to understand why people get defensive, when you talk about veganism, but it has a lot to do with guilt, identity, culture, and psychology. Because you're also questioning that cognitive dissonance that, hey, I'm a kind person, I'm a good person, I love animals, but at the same time you're telling them that the choices that you're making is actually harming and killing animals. And that's a dissonance that not a lot of people want to sit with. So
Correct.
it's almost us holding up a mirror saying that, hey, this is wrong. Maybe there's a better way of doing it. Maybe, there's a better way of showing them the truth. Maybe there's a better way of, bringing them into the movement. But it's habits and ideologies that we've inherited. And so when you expose those systems, it feels like an attack on our entire reality itself. That did everything I believe was a lie. I mean, it
Hmm.
is, but do we want to go down that path where we question it? It's a beautiful and light at the end of the tunnel when you do cross that tunnel and when you do come out of it on the better side. But you have to be willing to go on that journey. So I think that's why a lot of people get defensive. They're not protecting the ideology; they're actually just um, protecting their identity.
Yeah, this can be a major identity crisis. I mean, imagine believing that you're a kind person and then realizing
Yeah.
that, the absence of compassion is actually not allowing you to be a kind person. It can be quite earth-shattering.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if we find a way to work around that, we might be able to push further than we have so far. It's just about understanding people, and it's about putting, again, that empathy, putting yourself in those shoes, saying, hey, I wasn't always like this. I did unsustainable things. I use animal products. So what was the journey like for me, and how would I want someone to talk to me? And that's not by attack. It's not by shaming them, placing guilt on them. It's not by putting them down. If you can relate to them and level with them, I think we might be able to come further than we have.
True. Let me ask you something purely psychological now. There are two different kinds of people. Let me just make two clear uh, groups.
Hmm.
Youngsters who feel climate anxiety versus those who feel that they are empowered enough to act. What do you notice about the mental health of these people? Is any one group doing better than the other?
I wouldn't say there's one group doing better than the other, but of course, I understand as someone, who's young and someone who's at the forefront of this movement, it's a lot of information to sit with. There's a lot of heaviness, there's a lot of data, numbers, grief to sit with and deal with. And sometimes, it feels like this is our future at stake. And whatever is happening, a lot of it also feels outside of our control because there's world leaders that are making this decision on our behalf and we have no say in it. So we see this destruction happen in real time. And sometimes you feel like what you're doing is not enough, but on the other side of it, it's like, what choice do we have? We have to keep fighting. We have to keep doing whatever we can in our capacity with the voices that we have to protect what we love, whatever
Mhm.
little of it we can. But there is that, and there's also this term, right? Eco anxiety. We do
Right.
have a lot of eco anxiety as Gen Zs, as millennials growing up. Maybe people who are older than us have a lot more power, have a lot more say in global policies and global actions that countries are taking, but our voices are not unheard, and they're most definitely not unimportant to these conversations. So there are of course two groups of people, but you need everyone. I know there are a lot of older people who also care, who've paved the way. They have been the torchbearers of this movement, and you also see a lot of action ground up, which gives me a lot of hope. I've been to a lot of COPs, Conference of Parties, which is the biggest climate conference by United Nations that happens every year. And the most intense energy that you feel, the most infection and energy that you feel is outside of the rooms where people are protesting, where people, young people get together, and there's those conversations that are happening. That community gives me so much more energy than any discussion that's happening in the boardroom, even though that's what's going to shape the agenda. But there's a lot of passion, and there's a lot of hope, a lot of energy, and all the souls that people put into this movement. And the only word I can come up with is infectious. It really inspires you to do more and do better.
I hear you. I mean, I completely hear you because what happens inside and outside is equally important because the ones who are
Yeah.
inside, making the policy are also listening. They also have their ears to the ground. They also know what's happening outside. And unless that noise is made, it will never be heard.
Yeah. Maybe they don't listen as much as they need to, but we just have to be louder because we've
Yeah.
been trying so hard to have a concrete plan on ending fossil fuels,
Yeah.
ending the support to fossil fuels. But I hope we get there sooner than later.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I also feel that this world, I mean, this world of social media, hyper awareness has put us in a state of emotional dysregulation. The world is feeling so overwhelming. But do you think making even small sustainable choices, like what we eat, what we buy, like you said, all our choices, this can give us some sense of agency?
Hmm. That's exactly what it is. And we make 100 different choices every day, right? We make so many different choices every day. There is a sense of agency. And it's in what you buy, what you consume, what you eat, what you spend time on. Your attention is currency, your money is currency, your lifestyle is currency. Everything is a vote for the kind of world that you want to live in every single day. You decide what you want to shape. And I think as consumers, we underestimate how much power we have. You buy from an ethical brand, a women-owned brand that pays its workers fairly, and when you support a brand like that, you're saying that, hey, I want you to exist and I want you to grow. When you
Hmm.
divert that money from a fast fashion brand where the CEO is making billions and trillions, and the wage gap between him and his a worker working in his garment factory is so huge, but when you're supporting the right brand, you're encouraging that to grow, and you're putting more of that out in the world. That's why I mentioned mindfulness and intentionality. When you question that, hey, I'm going to buy from a vegan, cruelty free beauty brand, I'm going to support a sustainable fashion brand, I'm going to buy my salads or herbs or microgreens from a local farmer. I'm, going to try to eat as much farm to table as possible. And in India, we have the privilege of doing that. I'm going to eat local seasonal fruits. I'm not going to eat imported fruits. I'm going to, find out exactly what's being grown in this month of January, February, what is local to us, what is seasonal to us, what is, native to where we grew up. And I'm going to just, consume more of that. That's power. And those are choices we can make really easily. And that agency, as you mentioned, does give us that sense of control. And that's the joy of making these these lifestyle changes, that you get to make the best decisions as to what is good for me. And it's also good for your health. It's not just it's sustainable because, oh, it's eco-friendly and I'm doing something for the planet. No, everything that is sustainable, that is eco-friendly, that is when that is done being more mindfully and intentionally, it's also good for you.
Correct.
Switching to, as I told you, from polyester clothing to like bamboo clothing is good for your body. Switching to a non-toxic, switching from a toxic period pad that has so many chemicals to a bamboo, to a biodegradable one, an organic cotton one, a reusable one that's also better for your period hygiene. So there's so many different choices that we can make on a daily basis where we know these choices just impact more than the planet. They will rewire your entire system first. And maybe that's the most selfish reason to be sustainable, is because it's good for you. Just start there.
Yeah, and even then, sustainability so often gets framed as sacrifice, doesn't it? I mean, a lot of people say, oh, you've given up leather. But we need to reframe this psychologically so people feel that this is abundance and alignment. This is self care, like you said. This is not loss.
100%. And I couldn't agree more, because people put that as, oh, I can't use leather and I can't drink milk and I can't do that. But I'm like, anything that you have to give up makes space for so many other beautiful things to fall in. But that identity alignment that happens, that I'm not a person who will buy something in the name of luxury that's actually abuse and exploitation and comes from the soul of another being. And I love that, the fact that I don't buy from luxury brands anymore, and I don't need status symbols to make me feel like I'm enough. That was an identity shift that I had to come to terms with. I would rather never step into those stores again than be someone walking around carrying a calfskin bag that I know was made from a 3-month old calf. I'm not, I'm not okay with that anymore. That's not who I am anymore. So there's never been about sacrifice for me, because I'm like, that's a Shreya that I have let go of. That's, Shreya that existed 15 years ago, who didn't know better. And I'm not gonna put her down because, she was just acting out of acting based on whatever information she was gathering from her environment. But now that I've done the research and I know exactly where that bag came from, and I know that I don't want to harm a calf on my behalf, I'm going to wear a pineapple skin bag. I'm going to wear a bag made of mushroom leather. I'm going to wear a bag made from banana leather. There's so many alternatives, even cotton, denim, metal. There's endless options for you to wear cruelty free and feel proud of doing that. So when you attach that sense of pride that, hey, I'm finally aligning my ethics and my values into my lifestyle choices, I think you start being really proud of those choices, and that reflects. That doesn't feel like sacrifice, it will feel like joy.
True. I think it's also very important that we cultivate this empathy in the next generation. But tell me, do you have any
Hmm.
ideas? How can parents, educators, or anybody who's responsible for a younger person help build empathy for the
Yeah.
planet, but without using fear and shame?
I think the first thing I would say is actually just go spend more time in nature, go on hikes, go on, trips where nature's at the forefront, center, hero of those trips, because you understand what you want to protect and what is at stake. Imagine a holiday without the ocean, without the beach, without the mountains, without the greenery. We travel to places to see nature. We travel to places to see animals, right? And the best way of doing that is in their own habitat. So the deeper connection that children have with nature, with the outside world, the faster and the deeper their connection will be to protecting it. And the biggest disconnect that I see now is that we spend so much time in cities, we spend so much time disconnected from this world that also makes us feel better. Imagine bird song. Like, I grew up listening to birds singing outside. Now people say that it's psychological, it's a therapeutic tool. Like, yeah, but I never thought of it as therapy. You
Correct.
just woke up listening to bird song.
It was morning for us.
Exactly. It was morning for us, and now living in Bombay, I don't get that anymore. But we have birdsong in our Spotify playlist and all of that. You have these artificial ways of embodying that. But now we know birdsong was therapy. You know that sunlight is really good for you. You know that walking barefoot on grass is really good for you. Now we call that grounding, and we call it all of these things. But water is healing. Sunlight is healing. Animals are healing. That is why we're not separate from nature. And when you realize that, and when you want to rebuild that bond and intersect and integrate yourself in nature as not someone who's separate from it, but someone who's one with it, you will find that connection and you will find that desire, that empathy to want to protect it.
Super.
So I think my number one tip would be take your children out to parks, not to zoos, not where
Hmm.
animals are caged, not where animals are enslaved, because you don't want to teach them that that is a form of entertainment, that, they need to be behind bars for you to learn something about them. But use ethical tools, go on ethical safaris, or use even AR, VR, AI to just teach them about animals and how beautiful they are. I think just start there.
Yeah, that's a great starting point. Thank you for that one. Shreya, I see you using a lot of social media to get your word across to a critical number of people. Tell me, how do you balance using digital platforms for advocacy? I mean, I'm sure you get a lot of rate cycles or eco guilt, but how can we all start using social media to get this message across more effectively?
I realized that social media is such an impactful and powerful tool because that's where people are at. You got to reach people where they're at. So you could be talking across different platforms, but if everyone's spending a lot more time on their phones, I realized that to bring about awareness, to talk more about these issues, I had to bring the content to where people were actually seeing it. So it's been an incredible journey. I was really camera shy. I didn't think I could ever create content, but when I moved back and I realized there were so many questions around sustainability, around veganism, I knew I had to do something. Now obviously that you see that sense of comfort, familiarity with the tools, with the apps and with social media platforms and stuff, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But it takes a lot of, I think, self discipline to not engage with hate comments. It takes a lot of self discipline to not go down the rabbit hole where you're yourself constantly consuming content. So if it's better for your mental health to follow the right accounts, to be really mindful in terms of who you're following, what you're following, how is that making you feel? Is it helping you? Is it giving you information? Is it making you a better person? Or is someone just putting something up to make you feel like you're not enough, like you're inadequate? And I think I started filtering all that out, that I'm not here to buy more, I'm not here to consume more, I'm not here to follow mini trends that happen with the whole, Labubu thing and all these like small consumption trends that you saw. I'm like, this does not, there's no way I'm participating in this just because it looks cool now. You're just amassing products, and it's going to go out of trend sooner than it came. So, stuff like that, you just have to be mindful of that. Can I just stand out from this? Do I need it? What is it? Why is it trying to what insecurities are trying to bring up, and am I still who I am without that product? So I think just a lot of self-reflection that's needed when you're on social media, that everyone's putting up their best version. You don't know anything about their lives. A lot of it could be a complete lie. So just be discerning that what you have is enough. Social media has just made us feel like everyone is living a better life than you are, and that's not true. So, just use that platform the way it's meant to. Form connections, reach out to the right people, let it amplify your work, let it help you in any good that you're trying to do. So, use it what it's meant to, which is connection, which is finding like minded people, which is finding in the right information, and, just get an overview and just tap out. That's it.
Fabulous. I love the word discerning here. I think all of us just need to be a little more discerning and we should be a little safer online with that. Well, let me
Absolutely.
change the pace here, Shreya. Let's get into a rapid fire segment. I
Sure.
want you to answer real quick, no second thoughts. All right?
Okay.
Your favorite book.
Oh, what I'm reading right now, it's called Total Fashion Ethics by Emma Hackinson.
Okay. Your favorite movie character.
Um, Okja. There's this movie called Okja. I'm not gonna say more. Just go watch it. It's beautiful.
Oh, lovely. I should look this one up.
Yeah.
Your biggest pet peeve.
Uh, I would say close-mindedness,
Okay.
when someone's just not open to hearing another opinion.
Fair. The one thing that you believed in but no longer do.
The dairy industry, that believing that being vegetarian was being ethical. Once you know what happens, you will no longer believe that being vegetarian is ethical. You will want to be vegan.
Okay. Your most prized possession.
Oh my God. Because of the work that I do, I would say my phone, but that sounds like a really
No, it's fair.
superficial
It's
answer.
fair.
But it's where I work, it's where I upload my content, it's how I record, it's how I do everything. So, probably that.
Okay. Well, let me take you to the next segment, which is my favorite. It's a question I ask all my guests, and I think it's the answers that I've been collecting through this question is what makes me feel very, very happy. Oh, we
Hmm.
all know of a physical first aid box, the one that we keep for our, daily issues when we have some cuts and bruises, painkillers, band-aids, etc., what we put in it. But if you
Yeah.
were to keep a mental first aid box for those days when, you need a little emotional pick-me-up and just a little taking care of, what would you
Hmm.
keep in your personal mental first aid box?
people that People who love you in a way that just makes you feel seen. There's no filters, there's no censoring, there's no second guessing it, just people who make you feel loved. I think that's number one. My friends have done way more therapy for me than my actual therapist, so I think that walks in nature, as I said, just any proximity you have to nature, to animals, it will heal you. Exercise, any if I could put exercising, just movement. It could be dancing, it could be swimming, it could be Pilates, it would be aerial yoga, anything. Just move, and it'll help lift your mood up in any situation. I think these three, just dogs, cute animal videos,
Mhm.
walking, nature, and people that you love. That's all you need.
Yeah, true. I think that's a very generic first aid box which can work for almost anyone. It's beautiful.
I would also put a vegan dessert in there. So like it always
Mm.
helps. Like just that I dive into this tube of vegan and sugar-free pistachio gelato from -30, and I think that also cures my sorrows faster than anything else. So also
Of
that.
course. We always need that one little thing which doesn't demand anything, just gives. Okay, Shreya, before we come to an end of the conversation, I always leave the floor open to my guest. Is there any question you want to ask me as a psychologist?
Ooh, I think probably the same question that you asked me in terms of why do people get defensive when all vegans are trying to do is save animals. It's the only social justice movement where the victims can't speak up for themselves. If you look at any social justice movement, whether feminism, women's rights, women could still, protest. Um, when there was Black Lives Matter movement,
Hmm.
there were people who were representative of that movement. Same with LGBTQ rights, but animal rights is the only movement where the victims can't speak for themselves, which is why like our work becomes so difficult. And we find different ways of doing it, but there's almost this wall that goes up the second you tell people, the second you start talking about dairy, especially in India. And I get it, I get the culture, I get the identity aspect of it. How do we do better as people who care about animals to get other people to start caring about them the way that we do?
I think a lot of data which is available for us to consume is also creating an issue in this sense. I have seen so many videos talking about how all this is a conspiracy theory, how being vegan is just about showing off that you're different. Simple things, but when they're attacked in such a strong manner online, people who want to stay happily in their zone of consuming animal products then feel very comforted that, oh, yeah, these people are just talking about some things which don't matter. They just want to be different. They just want to show that they are better than the rest of us. So, this kind of content needs to be curtailed. This kind of content needs to be questioned. And we need to tell people that it's all right for whatever choices you're making. But being vegan or taking care of animals or at least not harming them is natural. This is not the unnatural thing. So, what has technically happened is everything else has been touted as natural, right? Whatever we've been doing all this time,
Yeah,
like you said, even advertising, we thought Bonvita was healthy when we were growing up.
yeah,
I mean, we were told
yeah,
to drink Bonvita because it made you better, healthier, stronger, taller, whatever. So that's the
yeah,
same kind of advertisement which is going on and on and on now, because now you have milk and then you have fortified milk and then you have cow's milk and then you have buffalo's milk and then this, ghee cow's milk, and everything is better than the one that you had last. So you need to tell people that this kind of advertising has to come with a caveat. I think everything which is animal based should have a red dot on it. We don't just need to put a red dot on products which are meat, but we can put a red dot on milk products also. Visually, we're not doing enough. And I think as a species, we are very, very visual. So when
yeah,
somebody sees a milk product and says, oh, this is green, now green means a green flag. A red is
hmm,
technically a red flag, is what we have been accustomed to. So when you
yeah,
see green everywhere, you feel it's good, it's healthy, it's good, it's something I need to do for myself. And then of course the age old saying, ये तो हम सालों से करते आ रहे हैं. If it didn't harm us then, why will it harm us now?
yeah,
And then
exactly.
yeah, I've seen people, kind of perpetrate videos which say that if you don't kill the cows, they're going to overrun humans. And so it's important to cull them, but you're breeding them. So you have to stop breeding them. Let nature
Yeah,
take its course, right? Let them live the natural life that they are meant to live. Let them die of a natural death, even by a predator is okay. You don't need to
yeah,
save a cow from a leopard, but you need to save a cow from a human. So these are not the stories that are coming out, which is why people get defensive, saying everything
hmm.
we've done till now was so natural. People think they're more grounded and they're more real if they're consuming all the things that their grandparents did. So that narrative also needs
Which
to
was
change.
millets. I mean, that was inherently plant-based. That was very much a plant-forward diet. And that's what's happened because even the industrialization of milk happened post-colonization.
True.
They needed yogurt, cheese, leather, and that's how the entire industry was set up the way it was because we operated very differently in our history. Now the way that it was that we were culturally, we were quite sustainable because if you told our grandmothers about zero waste, circular economy, not having disposable stuff. That's how they lived. They didn't need
Yeah.
anyone to teach them sustainability. So same thing with plant forward diets, that we used to have a lot of millets, we used to have a lot of plant forward foods. um, and it's changed now, so it's all literally like going back to how we used to consume.
I think
That's why
these
I think
stories are
that,
the ones that need to take center
yeah,
stage. That we're
yeah,
not doing something
absolutely.
fantastical, we're doing something normal.
Yeah, and that's what I realized, like going vegan, that you can have your idli and dosas minus the ghee, you can have your bhel pani puri, you can have rajma chawal, you can have all of these things that are vegan. All your sabzis, rotis, minus the cream and the dairy that we add to it now, they were plant-based. They were
Absolutely.
predominantly plant-based. So I think just bringing that, and our relationship with animals was also, there are books about it, that religion centered around how there's life and God in every living being. So I think just that's what it's about, and that's what veganism is. It's not a new concept. It was the truest definition of Shakahari, because it's anything that comes from a plant. That was Shakahari. So it's just about re-embracing that and knowing that we were always the kind of people that were respectful, caring, of animals, and we just need to bring that back. That's it.
Super. I think one of the most important takeaways for me in this conversation is that we're not doing something which is completely out of the blue. We're not doing something which has never been done before. We are simply doing something which we've been doing for generations. We took a little break from it. We went wayward. We just need to come back to what we were doing earlier.
Mm, yeah,
And I also love the fact that there's a speed with which you speak. I think the generation that you come from is actually in a hurry to kind of correct the things that the previous generations have been messing up with. So I notice a lot of my podcasts are heard on 2x speed. A lot of my listeners will say, "Oh, I'm going to put this on 2x and then just finish it." But
yeah,
I'm sure this is going to be one podcast where people don't need to listen on 2x speed, because you have been speaking with an intensity and a fervor which is, it's urgent. It's just do it. Like, change it now. Don't wait for tomorrow to change something. And I love
yeah,
that. I love the urgency that comes in, with this simple thing, like small changes, but do it now. Don't wait to do it tomorrow, or then it will be too late. Right now, I think we still have,
absolutely.
the time and space to make the correct changes. So thank you so much, Shreya, for being on the show, for bringing in so much insight, and for doing all that you do for the environment. All the very best, and more power to you.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for giving spaces to conversations like this, because that is how the movement grows. That is how awareness grows, and that is how we become kinder, more empathetic people. And like you said, it's not about learning something new or doing something new. It's just remembering. It's only about remembering and going back to who we used to be in the best way possible, with more awareness, with more intentionality and mindfulness. That those are, I think, three words that kept coming back for me throughout this conversation. And we don't have that much time, but more than us, the animals don't have that much time. As we're speaking, they are losing their lives. So everything that we do, it is for them. At the end of the day, they don't deserve to have their entire lifetime served up as a 10-minute meal. So if we can find that connection to them, I think that's the only thing that I would urge people to do. We have it in us. We are part of nature. They are us, and we'd want to be treated the way we would want to treat them the way we want to be treated. So once we find that empathy and we find that love for them, there is no going back. So I know we have it in our hearts. It's just about finding it.
Absolutely. And let's all do it together. Thank you so much once again,
Thank
and
you.
wishing you all the best.
You too. Thank you so much.